What is up, Gas Money Nation? It's Robert and Austin back with another episode in our Gas Money Mentioned series. If you're passionate about entrepreneurship, motivation, financial freedom, or just looking for inspiration, this episode is for you. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting Jake Randall, who is the owner of Wild Freedom Financial Coaching. Jake began his journey to financial freedom by paying off over $100,000 in student loan debt in just 2.5 years. From there, he used his countless hours of learning and experience to begin helping others reach their financial goals. In this episode, we learn more about Jake's journey, his favorite client success stories, and the crucial impact that mindset has on becoming financially free. As always, we hope you guys enjoy this episode, and if you do, the best way you can support us is by sharing and leaving us a review with your thoughts. Now, without further ado, please welcome Jake Randall.
So my name is Jake Randall. I'm located in Midland, Michigan, and I am a financial coach for young professionals and young business owners. And so basically what that means is I get to help my clients go from feeling lost in the woods to confidently navigating to freedom in their personal finances. So I've been doing that for a few years. It's been a lot of fun. I'm excited to dive into it today.
Definitely. And I know every good journey like this starts with humble beginnings. And I was looking through your website earlier, and obviously before we kind of started talking here, I mentioned how we focus really on that young adult age group who generally, has some of the most struggles with money as you're getting older, kind of realizing what it's like to become an adult. And one thing I saw on the website is that, when you were starting out and kind of what got you motivated to do Wild Freedom is you and your wife had to pay off over $100,000 in student loan debt. And the awesome statistic is you were able to do that in 2.5 years. So I guess just tell us a little more about what that process was like and kind of how you navigated that.
Yeah, totally. It's a great question. Whenever I share that, people are always like, how many years? And then the next question is like, how was that possible? How'd you possibly do that? And honestly, that just highlights like one of my favorite things about what I get to do in my work is like help people to vision cast and like shift from kind of that like static mindset to that growth mindset about what's possible. In our case, man, what we did is we basically looked at each other and we were like, we would have so much more financial freedom if we didn't have this major liability of this mega loan on our backs. We could do so many other things that we were actually excited about. And so we put together a plan and started to optimize on the spending side and on the earning side. And a big part of it too is like just being unified and creating that visibility together. And basically use the skills and the habits that I now coach my clients in to pay off more and more. And it was so crazy, guys. Like as we got into it, we'd make an extra payment of $1,000. And then the next month we were like, maybe we could do 2,000. I was kind of the initiator a little bit more, but once my wife got on the bandwagon, then she was like, honey, could we do $3,000 extra this month? Now she was like bringing me along. And so it kind of like became a game, eventually like how fast could we do this? Which was awesome and like just accelerated until we were completely done.
That's huge. That's a great story. And I mean, at what age was that? So was that out of right out of college or when did that whole process start? Obviously, it was probably kind of a necessity mindset, or was it something else that kind of drove you to be like, all right, we really gotta start taking care of this?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for us, that timeline started right after Katie graduated with her master's degree. So I had quit the job I was working at the time, moved to Nashville, Tennessee, where she was doing her PA program, and that's where we got married. Once she finished is when we kind of had that total of the 100K. And started figuring out how are we going to pay this off. And man, like honestly, for us, we were scrappy, man. Like when she was getting credentialed and starting, like she hadn't even started as a PA yet, so she wasn't even making like regular full-time income. Because it takes so long to do the credentialing and the insurance piece at the hospital, like she started working for Shipt and just like did that. Like I give her a lot of credit. Like we were hustling, big time to make that happen. Which is another reason I think what you guys do is so cool. Like that side hustle mentality is like so powerful. But yeah, for us, we were just really excited about it. And we were looking forward to like, hey, we'd love to be able to travel. We'd love to be able to retire early. We want to start having kids, and all of those things are going to be a lot less stressful if we get this done.
Definitely. And I feel like as a young adult, especially kind of going way back, especially in Austin and I's minds, the first real experience we had with financial literacy was reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I'm sure
nice.
you're familiar with, obviously. And it kind of opened our minds because I think we were in like high school, probably like freshman, sophomore year when we read it. So it kind of opened our minds to not only the importance of investing, but also the importance of being financially literate, because like you mentioned, and as it says in the name of your business, Wild Freedom, you can't really have the freedom to go on vacation, to travel, to do what you want to do, and just support yourself if you don't have your finances figured out. So I feel like there's usually a turning point in everybody's life where they, start becoming passionate about that. And obviously that's the route you've chosen to go. So I guess when you were a young adult, were you always passionate about, financial freedom and finance in general, or was there like a turning point that you had?
That's a good question. So, man, I remember really kind of the beginning of me getting into personal finance and financial literacy and all that was when I was in the Eli Broad College of Business at Michigan State. I had to take some finance classes and that type of thing. And as crazy as it sounds, we used to make fun of our professor because she was a finance professor, and she showed us this video early in the semester. It was basically an advertisement for the Wall Street Journal. And she was like, the one thing I want you all to do is read the Wall Street Journal. And we were like, how much is the Wall Street Journal paying this lady to do this? But sure enough, I went on their website, and it was like $2 for a student. You could get like an entire semester or whatever, Wall Street Journal. So I remember doing that and like starting to read more about money just from that. Like, couldn't understand half of it, but it got me interested. And then from there, man, I had some other like family influences in my life who were really, really good with money and kind of sat me down like right around the time I was getting ready to graduate. Started taking in other personal finance publications. And then I even did Financial Peace University through Ramsey. And kind of all of that together like really sparked the journey of realizing like, holy smokes, this is not like a fixed path that I'm on financially. If I decide to be intentional, I could totally change the course of things like not just debt freedom, but like work optional freedom and all sorts of really cool stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you mentioned Ramsey. So obviously now, and I mean, he's been around, it seems like, for a long time in the financial space. And it's an interesting viewpoint too on Dave Ramsey, because he has, this, it's almost like there's a spectrum to everything. So there's a point where it's like, okay, you can't use any debt whatsoever, cash only. Like, I'm going to buy my, first house and just straight cash and things like that. No mortgage. It sounds great, obviously, but it's, is it realistic? But I mean, there's a lot of points, and I guess break down kind of a few things that you got either from the course or just, I don't know if you listen to his podcast or just the different, a ton of content out there, obviously, but just a few different things that really stuck out to you. Cause there's also plenty of things that he says that are realistic. It's just, it's being, the one thing you just mentioned was really being intentional. And then, if you could break down a couple more from him, that'd be great too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I get asked about Ramsey all the time, being a financial coach, and a lot of times when I'm getting asked, it's a very, very loaded question, right? People either love him or they hate him, and they're like trying to peg me. Do you like him or hate him? Which is so funny. But I'm always like, here's the thing, Ramsey's on the radio. He's giving broad advice to the whole public of America, right? And that's going to be so different than a coach who's sitting across the table from you and knows your situation and knows what, just like you said, Austin, what's realistic for you, what's going to be most practical for you in this situation. But yeah, man, a couple of things that stand out to me that I think Ramsey has nailed is he has this gazelle analogy when he's kind of comparing like a gazelle running from a cheetah to you running from your debt. And his whole point is that people don't wander out of debt. And I think that's like so true. Like, you got to make a decision and make a game plan if you want to get out of debt quickly, and then run like you're that gazelle to go as fast as you can. And that's mainly for like kind of like your consumer debts, right? Like your problematic debts, not necessarily like a productive loan that's helping you start a business, right? So I think he nails it with that. I love that analogy. I also love that he's really big on ownership. I don't know if you guys have read Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. You guys would love it. Check that book out. You guys would really enjoy that. But it's very similar to some of the philosophies there, where it's like really kind of have your first reaction to everything in your life be that I need to take responsibility for it. And I think that's so helpful when we can make that switch in our financial life and not say that, well, my income is fixed because that's what my job chooses to pay me, and my expenses are fixed because that's what the government's doing these days with inflation or whatever. But rather to say, no, I actually have the biggest factor of control. There's other factors, right? But me is the biggest one. And then your mind is opened up to be able to negotiate your salary, or figure out ways that you can cut some costs. And I've got tons of awesome stories with clients doing that type of thing. But I think that's another thing that Ramsey really nails. That's super motivational when you start to open your mind to that possibility.
100%. And I want to touch on the client stories because I'm sure there's some awesome stories in there. Before we get to that, though, I was looking through the profile, obviously, kind of your history, and I noticed in addition to studying accounting, finance, analytics, you also studied psychology. And one thing you mentioned earlier and just now is the importance of mindset when it comes to debt. It seems so obvious, if you have a mountain of debt sitting in front of you, which you've had before with that $100,000, it might seem impossible. So, obviously there's a large relationship between the mindset and the financial aspect of getting out of debt like that. I guess how do you figure out ways to kind of convey this to clients, and is it like which aspect of it, the mindset side or the financial side is more difficult to coach, I guess, or does it go hand in hand?
Yeah, great. That's such a good question. Such a good question. Man, the mindset side is huge, especially early in the journey, because it honestly takes some kind of rewiring of how we view money. Because for most of us, like we graduate college, and up until that point, money hasn't really felt all that real yet because we didn't have much of it to manage. Maybe mom and dad or student loans are kind of supplementing our income, So when we get to that point where it's like, all right, I'm 22, I've got my first job. All that we really have as far as inputs are like just messages from the world, which are going to be like a grab bag. Mostly are probably not going to be that helpful, So some of the things that I try to kind of help my clients to rewire early on are things like the point of a cash flow plan is not to spend as little money as possible. It's to use our money intentionally. That's like a huge barrier, right? Like we hear the word budget. I actually don't really use the word budget very often, right? Because it kind of triggers resistance. It's like, oh, that sounds restricting and boring and ugh. But if we think about cash flow planning, not as a way to spend as little as possible, but to channel the money that we have to the things that matter most, that's huge. Like hand in hand with that is helping my clients to kind of realize, like, how can you best choose what you want most over what you want now? Because they're like so directly connected, right? And if we can nail that, like that's another huge thing. And then finally, like a big thing that I work early in the journey with clients on is like, if you can develop a way to manage your money that conquers the two biggest obstacles of why people fail with cash flow planning, then you're so much more likely to win. And those two big obstacles are either it wasn't closely connected to your goals, so it wasn't emotionally motivating. Like if Robert, if you were using a cash flow plan and I called you and said on a Tuesday morning at 7 a.m., why are you using a cash flow plan? And you couldn't say immediately to me, because I'm going to be debt free on January 2025, or I'm going to hit this goal, or I'm going to do this. You're probably not motivated. You're probably not sticking with it, right? It's also got to be simple so it feels sustainable. It's not something that like is a huge lift or a huge pain, to kind of manage your money with. So mindset's huge. Yeah, it's super huge. And beyond that, just general vision casting is important. A lot of people in their 20s haven't really thought much beyond their 20s. I mean, that was me, right? Haven't really thought about like, dude, what if you could retire at 50? Like, you don't have to be 70 like your dad was. Like, there's no requirement, there's no law that it has to be like that, What if you could be work optional? Maybe you still want to work, but you could do work that you love, even if it doesn't pay much, So kind of opening clients' minds and stuff like that is a ton of fun and super important and powerful.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. The psychology side. I mean, money in general. I mean, obviously that can be a hard conversation for a lot of people, even just to, sit them down and really break down, some of the debts that they have. And, it can be kind of embarrassing at some points, I'm sure, that you've had conversations and, but like, how the mindset works and the psychology that I'm sure that you've done really well with is just, making them very comfortable. Like we're going to make a plan for you. And, the motivation to that just having a date or having a plan, I'm sure is huge in somebody's mind that's really trying to figure it out financially. And also right before we get into some client stories, so actually starting Wild Freedom, I mean, you guys obviously had you and your wife had a huge accomplishment getting yourselves out of debt and getting yourselves on a much better path financially, to your own financial freedom. So was that one of the biggest inspirations and motivators for you to be like, I want to help other people do this too? Or was there something else that kind of threw you into this, or, cause that's the entrepreneurship side, really, I can make a business out of this, or was it really just, I just want to help people?
Yeah, great question. So I mean, you guys probably talk about this all the time. I love that idea of like the best kind of work. I'm going to totally butcher this, but like the best work for you to be doing is like that intersection of like what the world needs, what you're good at, and like what you can make money doing or something like that. Do I have that right? Are those the three?
It's something like that. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it was, I really wanted to kind of approach it from that perspective. And it started out as like, okay, I have gotten super intentional, learned a ton, both kind of formally and informally, and how to get really good at personal finance. And I was having friends and family like request me to come and like sit down with them and help them out. And so that was kind of like the spark for me to be like, okay, I've had a ton of success with this. Other people are asking me for help. So I went and got some more formal training in financial coaching itself. Not even sure yet if I wanted to do it as a career or just to help people on the side, right? And so that's where kind of that element of like, is this viable as a business came in? And so I started taking beta clients and kind of building out the LLC and the brand a little bit. And that's when it was like, oh man, like there is demand for this. And I would love to be able to help more people just have a breath of fresh air. And like you mentioned, Austin, like go from feeling like I don't know what to do next, I'm sort of drowning in 50 things that I should, quote unquote, should do to fix my financial situation, to feeling like they're confident. And when I realized like, yeah, like this is super, super valuable over the length of somebody's career, and that like there is a market for it, it was like, okay, I'm in with both feet. And it's just kind of been off to the races since. So that was kind of how it came to be in the beginning.
That's awesome. And then as it's grown, obviously you've worked with many different clients. I guess if you had to put a number on it, I mean, like hundreds of clients, are you kind of working there? Obviously you're one person right now, correct?
Right. Yeah. So right now it's just me running the show,
which is awesome.
Yeah, kind of wearing all the hats. Yeah. And so, yeah, I've been able to interact with a bunch of people, most of my business is through the one-to-one coaching. That's kind of like my bread and butter. But yeah, recently I've been getting into doing some speaking as well. So that's kind of even, broadened the number of people I've been able to impact. Actually, most recently, I was speaking to a group of entrepreneurs on how financial freedom in your personal life can empower your entrepreneurship journey, which was a ton of fun. So I'm hoping to continue doing that.
Yeah, that's very great. And I know that's how you met Austin, correct? Was at the Doxa dinner? Doing the
met Austin, at the Doxa dinner, and then kind of coming out of that. So Doxa does training for entrepreneurs, and they needed to provide some personal finance training. And so it was actually through the same organization that I was recently speaking in Flint to a group of entrepreneurs. So yeah,
that's so cool. And Adrian and James, both of them are great. They were the ones who kind of helped us with gas money in the early stages, and just networking events like that are awesome. That's kind of why I'm a little sad I'm out in Utah, because I wasn't able to go to that. But no, it's just really cool on the entrepreneurship side, getting to know people, getting to meet people. And that's one thing I was going to kind of transition into is working with clients. Obviously, I'm sure every client you work with, you have a very positive story about. It's probably hard to choose, but, give us some examples of, stories that really, truly make it rewarding for you, not only for your clients, but for you to see, I'm really making an impact here.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm thinking of two examples that, might kind of relate, especially to your guys' audience in the entrepreneur field. One example of just a really cool story. So young guy I was coaching who had recently started a business, doing cybersecurity, and he was really good at generating business income. It was just him, but he had crazy business income coming in the door. And his work expenses were reasonable. So honestly, like, therefore his personal income was pretty darn high. But like crazy stat. It's like either 50 or 60% of Americans who make six figures are still living paycheck to paycheck. Like we think six figures is a silver bullet, but like it's not. And it just highlights like how much the skills and habits of what you do with your money actually matter. And this couldn't have been more true with this individual. And so when he first called me, he was like urgent. He's like, dude, I need to get on the phone with you. He's like, I think I need to file for bankruptcy. I'm basically going to have a conversation with you as my last option. And again, remember, this guy was like a really high earner, right? And so we dig in and we start kind of mapping out, all right, man, like, let's look at what are all your assets, what are all your debts? Like, let's get a grip on where your money goes. Like, just get our bearings, to start. And as it kind of played out, he did have a lot of debt. He had, I want to say, like maybe 8 or 10 different debts between credit cards, personal loans, auto, different things like that. And so it did feel like a mess. He's like, yeah, dude, this is why I think that there's basically no way out of this situation. So I said, well, listen, man, let's explore some skills and habits, because you're going to need these no matter what, bankruptcy or not, right? Like, you're going to need skills and habits on the other side of it. Let's see what that kind of does for your situation. And so we dove in and we tackled the mindset pieces that were missing, and we got him really organized to where he could start using that money intentionally. And it was about a year later, this past summer, we got on a coaching session. He's like, dude, I'm 100% debt free. He had paid all of them off. And it was so cool to hear from him that he went from like, I am straight up hopeless to I'm totally debt free now. And now I can start saving for other like really exciting stuff that I want to do in my business and with my family.
That is amazing. Yeah. Because with debt, and I'm sure a lot of people go through this, the hardest part is really just making a plan and starting out, correct? And a lot of that goes back to mindset, because you've got this mountain sitting in front of you. And it's funny, as I'm saying that, I'm looking at your logo, with the, being in the lost in the woods metaphor that you started out with. Just a quick transition here. Like, what inspired you to come up with the name Wild Freedom with the outdoor theme, everything like that? I was looking through the website. I love it personally. I guess, where did that come from?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So it kind of came from one, just like, man, my personality, like, I just love outdoor stuff. I did a post on social today about a trip to northern Michigan where we were cutting wood and fishing and kayaking, and just how refreshing that was. And honestly, that post kind of encapsulates like where did the name come from, because I also think that it's such a great analogy to think about our financial journey like this mountain hike experience. If you're climbing a mountain, if they just drop you off in the middle of nowhere and you don't have a compass, you don't have a guide, you don't have a map, like, that experience is going to suck and you're not going to get very far. But if you've got all the tools that you need and you've got a guide who's showing you the direction, it's still going to be effort, because any journey, entrepreneurial, personal finance, like, it's still going to be effort. But man, when you hit that clearing and you take that deep breath of that cool mountain air and you catch that beautiful view, that little sense of freedom, like, oh my gosh, it's so worth it. And I just think that's so comparable to experiencing financial freedom in our lives, when we really do have more power to make decisions, to do things that are important to us. So it was kind of a combination of just personality and like a really, really good analogy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because that one story you were just talking about with, the client who had 10 different sources of debt and just didn't know where to start out. That's exactly the feeling you have when you're lost in the woods. And I've never really thought of it that way, but it goes along perfectly. You know, I guess in terms of the experience and not only starting the business, but kind of that sales cycle, getting on discovery calls, finding clients, taking that consulting approach. A lot of that involves skills in sales. And for context, in addition to Gas Money, I recently started a sales job as a business development representative. So doing cold outreach, everything like that. And
Nice.
Funny enough, I had a cybersecurity company. So kind of
Oh,
funny
no
you
way.
mentioned that's what that guy was doing. But it's interesting, discovery is one of the most important parts of sales because you have to figure out if there's a proper fit there. And a lot of times with what I'm doing, there's a lot of moving parts with what you're doing. However, there's a real, not only physical need to find a way to get out of that debt, but it's very emotional. So when you're on these discovery calls, I guess, what sort of structure do you have in terms of like the questions that you ask, and then ultimately, obviously after the call, like creating that relationship?
Yeah, sure. No, man, I would just totally encourage any entrepreneur out there who has skills in like whatever their thing is, whether it's baking or it's tech or whatever. And then you start, one of the things that smacked me in the face was like, you start to begin that entrepreneurial journey and you're like, I have to wear every hat, and one of those hats is sales. And for most people, like, they don't have experience in sales, or they feel like really, really uncomfortable with it. So I would just encourage, like, I can totally relate to that because that was me. Like, I had a background in a lot of different areas of business. Sales was definitely not one of them. So I had to learn all of that on the fly. But I think that's an encouragement that like it can be learned, even if it's awkward, like just do it, just keep doing it. It will get better. When I'm in a discovery session, I'm trying to understand a few things. I want throughout the session, I want the lead to feel heard, and I want to develop just an authentic connection with them. And I'm asking questions like, what made you want to get on the call today, to kind of unearth like what's really on their mind. And then I'm asking about kind of how that's affecting them, or how long that's been going on. How does that impact their daily life? To kind of dig a little deeper and see like, is this actually a problem that's worth solving? Because just like you said, like I need to validate that, or it might not even make sense to work together, A. But B, by asking those questions, it helps them to really recognize like, oh man, this actually does affect a lot of my life, and help them really decide like, do I want to solve this by investing some time and some money? And then I asked them about, what would it look like if you could fast forward and this was resolved? Like, what would kind of your ideal end scenario be? So that then we can start to bridge the gap and look at, okay, is the solution that I offer going to bridge that gap for you? And if we've done the call right and it's the right type of lead to where it is a really good solution, then a lot of times people are like, awesome, this is what I was looking for. I maybe didn't even know it existed, but I want to jump in. So that's kind of the very high level structure that I use during a discovery session.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. And while we're on the process conversation, so that's got to be pretty interesting. And I'm sure that you've figured that out and adapted and used many different processes along the way to figure that out. But it's probably not a one size fits all. Am I right about that? With kind of like it's not like, okay, join me, and then you're going to go through the same, 7 steps as all of my other clients. I'm sure there's a structure to it, which there has to be, but walk us through a little bit of what that process looks like, and then how maybe you have to adapt in certain situations. I'm sure there's different, things that you have to try out with different clients for their specific situation.
Sure. Yeah, totally. So every client journey is a little bit different. There's kind of a common like template in that in a lot of the things that are repeated, like everybody pretty much needs a dashboard of their assets and debts. Everybody pretty much needs to know where the heck does their money go. But then after that, yeah, it totally branches out. I mean, I have clients with no debt. I have clients who are making tons of money. They're just making no progress, So that's where like the value of a coach in a one-on-one context is really helpful, because I can really figure out what do they need at this point in their journey. and then kind of talk through like what that roadmap would look like. Something that has been really helpful to me that I think, it would be helpful for like any entrepreneur is figuring out, okay, what are kind of the parameters of what I want to offer, right? Like once you kind of have your ideal client, then you can figure out what do they need, and they might need more things than you're going to offer, but figure out what you are going to offer. So then you can take that and make it super repeatable. So even though the roadmap and the kind of the topics that I put in, like if someone wants to have their first baby or buy their first house, we'll talk about those things. If it's not applicable, we won't. But even though I'm customizing that, it's very modular. So I've got like really well-refined tools that I've built, really well-refined content for each of those things. So that way for me as the business owner, once I set the custom roadmap, I just drop in the modular content and it doesn't take as much prep time for me because it's a repeatable process. So that's been really helpful.
As you were kind of explaining that, I noticed that you mentioned, if somebody's goal is to either start a family or something emotionally like buying a house, etc., just having that emotional attachment kind of make it more of a, not necessarily more of a goal, but put more urgency in clients' heads, instead of just saying, I want to pay off debt, like instead of saying, I want to pay off debt, rather, I want to start a family. I want to go buy a house. I guess, how does that emotional attachment kind of help motivate people to start that plan?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's super, super important. You're like dead on it. One of the things that I do early in my client journeys is I have them complete something that I created. I call it a dream set, and it's kind of a brainstorming exercise and walks them through both kind of in the shorter term and in the longer term, what they'd like to be true of their financial situation. And one of the questions in there is, what would you do with the cash flow if you were debt free? Because you're right, it's like it is motivating to an extent, and also depends on the person, like to become debt free. But then like, what's after? Like, why are you trying to do that? It's like another question in there is like, what causes would you love to be able to give to or to give more to? Another one is like, how would it benefit your family? If you reached X goal. So I think that is super important, to be able to kind of think about what are you, emotionally pumped about. And for some people, yeah, that's like a baby or a home. And for some people, that's like a business, like, man, I don't really like my job right now. I don't like the kind of the line of work I'm in, but I'm passionate about this other thing. And I want to go do that. Like, okay, great. Like, let's get you set up financially so you've got the flexibility and the stability to go do that. And like, just use your job now to fuel that future dream.
Right. Because you mentioned a lot of entrepreneurs that you worked with. Is that one of your main focuses, or is it a broad spectrum? I guess do you have a larger percentage of a specific kind of client that you've been working with, or is it all over the place?
Yeah, so I would say most of my clients are either young professionals who, they're often college graduates, they're often making good money, working in some kind of a professional job, or kind of that, or they're young business owners, would be the other one. Most of my clients are in their 20s, maybe 30s. And yeah, that's just kind of like the niche that I've sort of grown into. That's been a really, really good fit. And a lot of fun. I'm like super huge fan of entrepreneurship and like helping people. And I hate seeing entrepreneurial dreams die unnecessarily because the money side of it wasn't organized, one of the stats actually, when I was speaking to that group of entrepreneurs and doing the personal finance training that I shared with them, I actually pulled it up here because I was like, these guys will think this is interesting. So I read an article from PNC, and it was about the top reasons that small businesses fail. And 2 of the 5 were connected to money. One of them was 82% of small businesses fail due to cash flow problems. I mean, when your business is really small, like that's not far removed from the personal side of your situation, right? But even more interesting is, of businesses that failed, 70% said that their business hurt their personal life, or their personal life hurt their business. And to me, I'm like, these are super solvable problems. If we can get in there and equip that entrepreneur, like, they're going to be able to have so much more success.
And from your standpoint, you've gain those business experiences in creating Wild Freedom,
Hmm.
So I guess before, I know we talked about, your financial experience before you got started with Wild Freedom, but growing up, were you ever interested in entrepreneurship? Did you ever foresee yourself starting a business?
That's a good question. It was something that always fascinated me. And I was working like side jobs and stuff like that, when I was young, and that was like the best thing ever, mowing lawn and, stuff like that. Um, and so I always kind of had this like fascination with it. And I remember thinking in college, like part of me wishes that I would have like done the entrepreneurial route within the business college. So it wasn't necessarily like my career plan. But then once I got to that point where I kind of had the idea of Wild Freedom, and I was like, shoot, like I'm like really blessed. I'm in this position where I've got a ton of experience in training and one-on-one mentoring. I've got the personal finance skills, and I had the business degree. And on top of that, like some really, really great business experiences and good mentors that taught me a lot just working for other companies for a few years, that it kind of all came together. And I was like, I think I could pull this off on my own if I wanted to. So it wasn't something I had like a long-term plan for, but was, yeah, just excited when I kind of realized like I could try this.
Yeah,
That's
it's always
yeah.
interesting too, because that's like how it goes, you get an
Yeah,
idea and it has to be something you're passionate about, right?
for
There's a
sure.
lot of people that go out and start a business for the money, which it sounds like the main reason you started it is for helping others.
For sure.
And as an entrepreneur, I feel like problem solving, especially for something that's, damaging people or really putting people down, when you can solve that, when you have a way that you can go out and solve that, it's like a fire. It's like a raging fire for you to go out and do that thing.
Mhm.
And I mean, we've kind of had that experience with gas money. Like when
Okay.
we were in high school, to give context, we were both on the tennis team. That's how we met, and we wanted a way to make money, but we were both super busy with school and sports, and really didn't have time to get a full-time or part-time job or work fast food, retail, whatever it may be. So that's why we went out and started mowing lawns, doing landscaping, and we called it gas money because high school kids doing work for gas money.
Yeah.
And we wanted to grow it. The reason that we've been growing it and putting money into our platform, trying to create a brand, is because we got so many good experiences, and being our own boss, working on our own time, and to
Mhm.
really extend that experience to other people and show them that it is possible is kind of what fuels us. And as
Mhm.
we've been talking to you today, it sounds like you have the same exact experience, even on a higher level, because we're dealing with people's finances. So I know we've touched on it already, but just like, how good does it feel, when you finally get somebody, when they finally reach that threshold of paying off all their debt, or they finally, have that child and are able to support them? I'm sure
Mhm.
it's very rewarding.
It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy cool. Yeah, it makes my week, when I have conversations like that with clients. Had an incredible conversation 2 weeks ago with the client where, man, just like mid coaching session, they were like, bro, I just want you to know that since we started meeting, my wife and I have like thawed crazy barriers that we had in our marriage around talking about money. And we're like communicating now, and it's just awesome. And that's like overflowing into other parts of our life and our relationship. And he was just so excited. And one of the things that I offer as optional to my clients is to read a verse from the Bible that relates to money and to pray together as we kick off our sessions. Totally optional. That's just part of my story, is Jesus has had a big impact on how I view money. And so in his case, they're like really, trying to go that direction with their life and their money. And so he was like, we're bringing more areas of our life under the lordship of Jesus. And like, yeah, just wanted to express to me that like what started with the coaching that we've been doing has just like sparked a bunch of awesome change in their life. So yeah, when stories like that come back, it's just like nothing could be better than like earning money and making a difference like that.
Yeah. It's just enjoying life more is what it sounds like. I mean, when you're able to not have to worry about money as much. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you could probably walk down the street and ask that one question, what's your biggest stressor? And I'm sure 90% or 99% of people are going to say, oh, money,
Yeah.
paying rent, um, paying for whatever it has to be to live and enjoy life. So it's when you don't have to worry about that as much, then it's just, you can actually start living, I guess. If I know that's kind of a more deep approach to it, but you said the religious side has been a huge, piece of that, which is awesome. And that really breaks down, having a religious outlook can really help you, really feel better every single day in life. I mean, I make sure to pray every day, and it does have a huge impact, when you don't feel alone, right? You're able to really, put everything out there and try your best every day, and not dig yourself into a hole if there's nobody else to kind of talk to, and put your worries out there, and just kind of give it all to God, So
Yeah.
that's a huge point. And I'm sure those prayer sessions that you have, even though they're optional, I'm sure most people are fine with that. And it really, it's probably a great icebreaker too, starting the conversations, getting everybody comfortable and relaxed, and realizing like, this is just a stepping, this is going to be tough, but it's a stepping stone in my life. And then I can, continue to just really live. You mentioned, I know there was the cybersecurity the cybersecurity guy example, and then was there also another one, or was that the one that you just mentioned?
No. So let me share another story. Really, as much as anything, as an encouragement to your listeners on the income side. Okay, so when we think about our personal finances, right, we're like, okay, I need a game plan. In my experience as a coach, most people, their mind goes to like the expenses. Like, okay, I got to manage my expenses, which is fair and good. Absolutely, we should do that. But I like to work from an equation that zooms us out a little bit. And we think about it like this: so that your income minus your expenses equals your financial independence dollars. So those are the dollars that are actually moving you to financial independence. So you're paying off debts with those, saving for short-term or long-term goals. And so to create more of those every month, you could raise your income or lower your expenses. And so on the income side, like, we skip that so easily, but there's really, really awesome opportunities to raise our income. One of them is that whole like side hustle, like download that Gas Money app, get on it. Like, I love that from you guys, because that's seriously like so powerful. Another one is negotiating your pay at your day job. If you're still at that stage where you are working a day job. And so I had a client who was changing jobs. They're moving cities, and they were going into a field that they were really excited about. They're going to be working with helping families in a really cool way. And they wanted to, as they were applying, they were hoping to make an increase in the amount that they were earning. And so when they received their initial offer from this application, it was for $85,000. And they came to me and they were like, hey, I need help to negotiate this. I don't really know how to ask for what I'm worth. And so I take my clients through like, all right, here's how you're going to structure the conversation. Here's like the market data you can pull. Here's like all the evidence you can kind of pull, what makes sense to use, so that they know exactly what to say and can be confident going into that conversation. And so they did that, and they followed the structure to a T, and they walked out of it accepting the job. From initial offer of $85K, they accepted at $97,000. So a $12,000 swing for their starting salary. And like, just think about that. Like, that's another $1,000 a month in financial independence dollars, right? Like, how much that impacts their situation. So I would just like encourage you guys, like, man, for those listeners who are like, they're still working that day job, they're still hustling, and maybe they want to quit it one day, or maybe they want to do the side hustle forever. Don't forget about that income piece of that equation, because there's so much you can do there if you're able to negotiate and ask for what you're worth.
That's huge, because a lot of times when people think of saving money, at least in my head, the only thing you think about is cutting expenses, right? But like you mentioned, negotiation, doing the side hustles, there's a lot of ways you can increase your income on that side. And I feel like if you have one of them going, that's good. It's good progress. But if you can find a way to increase income and then cut expenses, that's ultimately the solution that you want to find. For most of your clients, have you found, one way that usually works better for clients than the other, whether it's, finding ways to increase income, finding ways to cut expenses, or is it really just subjective on what their goals are?
Yeah, man, I would say it's like we try everything possible. Sometimes there might be a situation where it's like, I work for the teachers union, so there's not really a negotiation room there, and my schedule is such that it's going to be tricky to do a side hustle, for whatever reason. So like, okay, fair, then we're going to probably really zero in on, the expenses side. But for anyone like at all possible, I try to really help them exhaust all options on both ends. Um, because yeah, just like you said, like if you can make progress on both sides, like a lot of times my clients are able to find at least $200 a month in either wasted spend or just like low value spend that they want to move to like a higher priority goal. Some clients it's more like $1,000 a month. So if you couple that with anything on the improvement on the earning side, like it's just crazy how much your progress like accelerates.
Definitely.
Awesome. And then I
Yeah.
guess kind of transitioning a little towards the end as we come up on time. Obviously, before we started, we mentioned a lot of our listeners are young adults, kind of in that high school or college age, and a lot of them probably like ourselves at one point grappling with debt. I guess to start out, if for young adults right now who really don't know where to get started, I guess what's a good first step aside from going to Jake Randall?
Sure. Yeah, man. I think a really powerful first step is to just find out where does your money go today. And you can do that with a budgeting app. If you love spreadsheets, you can do that with a spreadsheet, like whatever the easiest thing for you. But I don't know that I've ever had a client walk through that with me and not be like, oh, wow, I had no idea that's where my money goes. And so I always just really encourage people that visibility creates control. And that's a great, great first step because it's also back to the emotional piece. It's very emotionally engaging when you see, and then you're curious. You're like, wait a minute, I didn't think I spent $800 a month on eating out. Like, is that right? And then you start to realize like, shoot, I have control over that now. Like now that I know that, like, shoot, what if I took half of that and put it towards a student loan payment? Like what would my timeline be like? It kind of like sparks all these other things. So just even that simple step of like looking at 1 month, where did your money go is really a great one to start with.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned eating out. And also, as a young adult still, there's it seems like just leaving the house, it's as easy just to spend $100. I mean, just you walk out of the house and there it goes.
Yep.
Have you noticed, obviously it's fast food. Fast food is, went through the roof pricing wise,
Right.
going out to restaurants, all that stuff. Have you noticed, a couple specifics like young adult spending wise, that are simple to cut out like that, or at least really like bring down? And I'm sure, at least for me, if I'm out going to job sites all day or, doing gas money jobs, you're out of the house for, 6-7 hours, then it's pretty easy to just, stop at Arby's halfway through the day. And then you go to a restaurant, before you get home. So that's one thing that I really try every single day. I'm like, if I'm going to do it, it's going to be once, and then I got to make it home. I don't care if I'm hungry. So are there a couple major things that kind of stick out with young adult spending like that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Yeah, so two come to mind that are often low hanging fruit. One honestly like would be food spend. I did some numbers because I wanted to like figure it out for myself. I looked at a bunch of different studies, might be like elevating a little bit, but like studies of how much a meal costs at a restaurant versus at home. And I kind of compiled all these numbers. And if I remember correctly, it came out to be that the same meal eaten at home versus at a restaurant is 4.6 times more expensive, which is crazy more expensive, right? Which like doesn't seem like a lot when it's just like, one lunch here, one lunch there, but like then you add those up, right? So that is a big opportunity for sure. The other one that I would throw out there is monthly costs, like subscriptions. These are one of my favorites to look at because it's usually a treasure trove, because you can go in, find, like make a list of all your subscriptions, and then ask yourself, I have my clients ask 3 questions. Like, am I still using this? Am I still using it enough to like justify it at this price point? Or like, Should I drop to the ad supported version? You know, that type of thing. And then finally, if you are, do I want this more than I want my other goals? And just ask those 3 for all your subscriptions, and you'll probably find a couple that you forgot about or that just aren't worth it right now. And that takes you 10 minutes to list them out and go cancel a couple, and you're now saving money every single month. So like the time and effort it takes is very, very small, but the payout is big because it's a monthly cost. So food and subscriptions are 2 big ones.
Yeah, and they sneak up on you too for both of those. If you're buying food, usually it's like $5 to $10. If you're getting fast food, obviously sometimes up to 15 to 20. And for me personally, I was buying lunch every day. I would go to like Chipotle. I'm a sucker for Chipotle. I love it.
Nice.
And every day it was like $10. And then I started looking, and I'm like, dang, I've spent like $300 on Chipotle this month. Like, it wasn't that much, but
yeah, for
it
me, it
was
was
a lot.
Chipotle when I lived in Nashville, so I get it.
Yeah. But one thing I started doing is like, in the mornings, sometimes I'd rush out of my apartment, didn't have time to make a sandwich or something. So I was getting like, my coworkers were kind of laughing at me, whatever. But I brought like a loaf of bread and then peanut butter jelly into my office, and like I just have it sitting in there. Nice. So if I want to go to Chipotle, like I don't have a choice. Like I'm like, I have to walk by the bread and the peanut butter and jelly and say, okay, I can make a sandwich here. So I feel like a lot of it kind of going off of that story is just like mentally putting yourself there. Like, do I really need this? I like how you mentioned with the subscriptions. Do I really need this? And it all goes back to the emotional side of things. So especially with young adults, a lot of us like instant gratification, and I'm definitely, a proponent of that. It feels good to, go buy fast food. It feels good to go out to watch a movie, whatever. Totally. So like, how have you kind of seen young adults struggle with that? And like, what's your method to kind of putting the mindset into to be more patient, especially when it comes to paying off debt?
Yeah, that's so good. That's such a good insight. Because we're all just wired for that, right? Like the marketing of every company ever that wants us to buy that $10 subscription or that $15 Chipotle, like, it's all convenience and instant gratification. So being aware of it is kind of the first big thing. After that, I like to kind of combat the hit that we get from those little instant gratifications, like with another kind of positive reinforcement hit on the other side of things. So a couple ways that I help my clients to do that are like, one, an example you gave of like paying off debt. Okay, how do we make that more compelling and emotionally engaging? So I'm always having clients make some kind of a visual tracker. So I'll have clients who will like do the traditional, like kind of like not thermostat, but the temperature thing. I'm not thinking of the right word, but you know what I mean? Where they're like, you like scribble it in from like elementary school and you're like raising, money for something. A thermometer. It looks like a thermometer. Yeah. So they'll like put that on the back of their door, like a full-size poster, and color it in a little bit as they go. I've had clients do like get really creative, like kind of like the chain link thing for like, I think like when you're getting ready for Christmas or something, they've done that for their debt payments, where they like rip off a link for like $1,000 they pay off or whatever. But anything like that just puts it before you and makes it kind of fun is really helpful. The other thing that I have clients do is in a kind of a monthly cadence, when you get to the end of your month, you take the financial independence dollars that you created that month, and you have kind of a ritual where you go and assign those. And so assigning those might be like making that extra debt payment, or like taking them and putting them into your fund for that trip to, England next year or whatever. And that's your time to kind of celebrate and like see your progress, so that you're not just like feel like it's just all going into a black hole, but you're actually like, I'm going to get some enjoyment out of this, by kind of having those mile markers. So I think that's huge. In addition to just like keeping that vision, like what do you actually care about most, is really powerful.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's everything you mentioned. It comes down to being intentional. Even if you want to enjoy that money at the end of the month, it's still taking the time to be intentional to assign it to certain things, and not just how a lot of people live. And at the end of the month, okay, this is what I have left. I hope that I can pay rent next month. Instead of having that hope, it's just being intentional. Okay, I went through this process, and now I can assign to certain things, and I can do these things because that entire time, even like the gamification almost that you were talking about, it's that fun aspect. It can sound so simple, but at the same time, most people they don't think of it this way. So it's difficult to really break things down, and, you know, have that ability to assign things at the end of the month. So I guess one last thing, I know we're coming down on time, on the entrepreneurial side. So we love almost every time we ask this question at the end of the podcast, but, and even it can be financial advice too, but we were thinking, you know, one or two, it's hard to really pinpoint. I'm sure you have a bunch, but one or two pieces of advice that you've learned along the way, either in business, entrepreneurship, finance, just something that you either talk about all the time that really hits home with a lot of people, just to really put it out there for the audience.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, man, of course, so many things, you know, for sure. But I guess two things that come to mind from the kind of on the entrepreneurial side that I would really encourage like any young entrepreneur with would be, one is really put effort into building your network. For a lot of people, like that doesn't come super naturally, but it's so valuable to be building that network. And really that's just like providing value to people around you, authentically getting to know like a lot of people. Like if you want to be an entrepreneur, you just have to expand your network dramatically. So I would really encourage people with that. The other one would be make processes. Like you're not going to be that profitable if you don't have repeatable processes. I don't really care what industry it is. There's something that you can make that would be more repeatable and more process driven, so that you can, you know, make more money and ultimately like stay in business longer. So I don't know. Those are the two things that jumped to my mind today that have been really important for me that, yeah, I'd encourage anybody with.
Love that. Yeah, that's awesome. And then before we go too, you know, how can people get in touch with you if they're either looking for services or they just want to connect? You know, feel free to shout out social media, your website. How can people reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, yeah, one of the best things would be my website, which is just wildfreedomfinancialcoaching.com. If you go there, there's a link. If you want to chat, you can get on my calendar. It's got all of my, you know, email and phone number and that type of thing there as well. You can find me on all the socials, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and stuff as well. But yeah, happy to chat. You know, if you go to my website, you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, cool. I guess before we go, thank you so much for coming on today. I think this has been a very insightful conversation, not only just for, you know, young adults, but for all age groups. Everybody has to deal with money in their life, and I really think you're doing good things here. And it's inspiring just to hear the few stories that you touched on. And I'm sure if we had unlimited time here, you know, you'd want to talk about everybody you've worked with. So you're doing amazing things. It sounds awesome. So thank you so much for hopping on today, Jake. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you guys. I love everything you're doing with Gas Money and just inspiring young entrepreneurs. Huge fan. So thanks.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, cool. For all the listeners out there, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. As always, if you did, feel free to leave a like, give it a share, leave some comments below. And until next time, go get that gas money.